We like to think of the human eye as a high-end camera. In reality, it's a budget sensor running very clever software. Most of the detail you see comes from a small patch at the center of your retina called the fovea. Beyond that small center, your vision becomes surprisingly vague, but your brain fills in the gaps, faking just enough detail to make reality feel seamless while aggressively ignoring everything it doesn't need. JPEG runs the same con, just in reverse. Not filling in what isn't there, but removing what your eye was never sharp enough to hold on to. Starting with color. Our eyes are wired to catch changes in light and shadow. That is how we recognize shapes, edges, and depth. Color works differently. We notice color detail much less than light and shadow. So the format separates brightness from color. It keeps the brightness sharp while stripping detail out of the color. From there, JPEG divides the image into a grid of 8 by 8 pixel blocks. Instead of describing those pixels one by one, each block goes through some math that turns it into frequencies, like sound, but for pictures. Some frequencies describe slow, gradual changes, like a soft gradient in the sky. Others capture details that change fast, the rough edges of tree bark or strands of hair. And that is where JPEG starts cutting, rounding many of those details down into zeros. But zeros still take up space if they are scattered through the block. So to compress things further, the algorithm scans through the block in a zigzag, moving from the broad shapes down into the fine details. Because much of that fine detail was just rounded away, this path naturally scoops up those zeros into long, continuous stretches. And long stretches are easy to compress. Instead of writing down 1,000 individual zeros, the file just writes a shorthand note: insert 1,000 zeros here. It then looks for patterns that show up the most often and assigns them the shortest possible labels. Stack all those mathematical shortcuts together and the image is finally complete. The result is a file much smaller than the original. To your eye, it looks nearly identical, but underneath, it's a sketch pretending to be a photograph. Back in the early days of the web, most pages were just text. GIF could handle simple graphics and icons, but photographs were too heavy for the internet people actually had. The web needed a diet. In 1992, a committee called the Joint Photographic Experts Group delivered one. Today, JPEG is still the default format for photographs almost everywhere. Apple, Google, and Microsoft have all pushed their own way past it. None have replaced it, at least not fully. But the JPEG story didn't stop with the original. It grew into a family tree with branches you've probably never heard of, and that's what we'll look at next. In 1999, the JPEG committee released JPEG-LS, built for lossless and near-lossless compression. That had actually been part of the plan from the beginning. Back in 1993, the original JPEG standard included a lossless mode as a late addition. Same family, different math. But the compression was weak, support was limited, and the algorithm had nowhere to go. Instead of breaking the image into blocks, LS plays a prediction game. For every pixel, it looks at the pixels nearby, above, to the left, diagonally, and tries to guess what comes next. The same way your brain can complete a word with a letter missing, context does the work. Guess right, and there is barely anything to store. Guess wrong, and it records the difference. Either way, in lossless mode, every pixel survives the process intact. It compresses surprisingly well for something this simple, and it does it fast. For everyday photos, that kind of precision is usually overkill. JPEG-LS never had to become the next web format. It was built for places where close enough was not good enough. JPEG 2000 was the first serious attempt to replace the original JPEG. Instead of treating the image as little square blocks, it used a wavelet-based algorithm to break the picture into layers of detail. Broad shapes first, then smaller details, then the fine texture sitting on top. When you ramp up the compression, it can strip away parts of those layers without the image breaking into the same hard square blocks. It usually fails more like a blur, sometimes with a faint ringing pattern around strong edges. JPEG 2000 supports both lossy and lossless compression, along with higher color depth and transparency. It also loads progressively, a rough version first, then sharper detail as more data comes in. You could even tell it where to spend its quality, sharp where it mattered, compressed where it didn't. In many cases, it could squeeze an image smaller than standard JPEG without an obvious drop in quality. In many ways, it really was the better format. But better was not enough. JPEG 2000 was heavier to process, and the patent situation made developers cautious. Camera makers had little reason to support it if browsers would not open it. Browsers had little reason to support it if cameras were not producing it. And even if all of that had gone better, it was still fighting regular JPEG, a format that was already good enough, already everywhere, and built into everything. People did not care that the picture blurred more gracefully. They cared that it opened. So JPEG 2000 never took over the internet, but it did find one very important home: digital cinema. By the mid-2000s, the problem was no longer just getting photos onto the web. Digital cameras were producing bigger, cleaner images, and people wanted to edit them without watching the file fall apart. Standard JPEG could still make photos small, but it was never built to preserve all that extra color, range, and headroom. The solution, Microsoft insisted, was Microsoft. Originally called HD Photo, it was Microsoft's answer to both problems at once. More capable than old JPEG, but lighter and faster than JPEG 2000. It solved the worst part of standard JPEG, the seams, by overlapping the edges. The math could smooth out the borders between blocks before they turned into a visible grid. It also brought the things people wanted from a modern image format: HDR, lossless compression, higher bit depth, and transparency. Microsoft tried to force adoption the way it could, by shipping it inside Windows Vista and calling it the future of digital photography. But it arrived right as the browser wars were heating up again, and being a standard wasn't enough. To everyone else, it was just another Microsoft thing. So JPEG XR never became the internet's next image format. It stayed mostly inside the Microsoft world, showing up in places like Office documents and Xbox game discs. Years later, it got the most Microsoft comeback imaginable. Not as the future of digital photography, but as a Windows 11 HDR wallpaper format. You can't just flip a switch and tell the entire internet to upgrade. If the old software breaks, the new format dies. JPEG XT was built around that problem. To old software, it looked like a normal JPEG, but newer software could read a second layer, more range, more color, and detail the old format could not carry. That layer rebuilt the better image, while everything else just opened the regular JPEG and moved on. Perfect. Almost impossible to hate, which in technology is usually what you build right before nobody cares. When nobody has to change, most people don't. By the time XT arrived in 2015, the web had already moved on. Google had been pushing WebP for years, Apple was moving its devices toward HEIF and HEIC, and browsers had become the ones deciding what the web supported. The committee had finally built a JPEG that could survive the future. The future just did not need it. Most JPEG formats were trying to make images smaller. JPEG XS was built for live video, where the problem was make it smaller without making it late. Sending everything uncompressed was expensive, but heavier compression added delay. So the industry needed something in between. Smaller than raw video, but fast enough to feel instant. A small Belgian company called Intipix had already solved that with Tico, a low latency codec for live video. They needed a standard, the committee needed a win. This time, nobody had to pretend it was going to replace JPEG in your browser. The industry already knew what it needed. The committee put a standard around it and got out of the way. JPEG XL was the committee's attempt to stop making side branches and finally build the main road. Built from proposals by Google and Cloudinary, it was meant to handle the whole modern image mess in one format. The important part was what it could do with the JPEGs already out there. Take an existing JPEG, shrink it into the new format, and later rebuild the original file exactly. Not just the image, but the file itself. That made it different from most replacement formats. Under the hood, XL keeps one foot in the old world. Like classic JPEG, it still works with image frequencies, but the structure is far more flexible. Blocks can change size depending on what the image needs, and the encoder has more ways to decide where detail is worth keeping. Against classic JPEG, it can be much smaller at the same visual quality. Against AVIF, it depends on the image and the quality target. AVIF can be hard to beat at lower bit rates, but XL has a real argument when quality matters more. Lossless, HDR, editing, archiving, that kind of thing. WebP, after a decade of being pushed as the future of web images, now looked more like the floor. Solving the format problem was only half the fight. The other half was getting browsers to make it normal. And for JPEG XL, that meant Chrome. Then, Google pulled the floor out. In late 2022, Chrome removed experimental JPEG XL support, saying there was not enough ecosystem interest to keep it going. For most image formats, that would have been the end. But XL kept getting adopted anyway. Safari, Lightroom, Photoshop, GIMP, you name it. Google eventually reversed course and brought JPEG XL back into Chromium. Still behind a flag, but back. JPEG works because your eyes are generous and computers are not. You can look at a compressed image and think, yeah, that's basically the same photo. A computer looks at the numbers and has no idea what basically is supposed to mean. That is the world of today's sponsor, the Code Monster Manual Volume 0, Escape from Number Hell. Most beginner resources teach you how to talk to the machine. This book follows the monster one layer down, what the machine thinks you said, how a picture becomes data, how a letter becomes a number, how colors, files, and images turn into rules wrapped around numbers, and how two images that look identical to you can be completely different things to your computer. It explains those ideas through monsters, fables, and strange little examples, the kind of book that makes you feel like you were let in on something. So if this video made the trapdoor creak, this book is the field guide to what's underneath. Check out the Code Monster Manual Volume 0. The link is in the description, or find it directly at kevinfoca.com.